Okay, let's kick it off. We will discuss DevOps and security and how it stands together. Not much of an introduction. I already been introduced plenty, so we'll just skip to this one and move to this. So anyone who actually knows me or had an opportunity to talk to me in IT department, I have two passions. It's basically DevOps and security, and in this session we're mixing these two together. We are trying to uh, put them in place and have a perfect process around us. So not too much talk is needed when we are discussing DevOps. It's been a buzzword, it's been a thing for over 10 years now. But just for a quick reminder, DevOps is basically there to help us. Organizations that implemented DevOps showed a great increase in value. The DevOps implementation provides better time to market, better software quality, uh, much more frequent deployments, revenue is increased. Companies that implement DevOps showed better customer reach and retention. So, from a business perspective, DevOps is bringing multiple values. And of course, any organization actually wants to implement it because it's bringing results. But in all this process, we are always discussing this DevOps cycle and how it falls together. And we don't really need to discuss the DevOps cycle itself because we are all very familiar with, like, we are doing the planning, then coding, building, testing, releasing everything, deploying it to multiple environments, operating it, and once it's in production, we're going to monitor it, try to learn about it, and start from scratch. Now, what many organizations in this cycle forget about is security, where security actually fits in. How do we put things around that? How do we squeeze in security in this very tight process that is full with different activities? And in these discussions, I've been often asked if I prefer DevSecOps or SecDevOps. And to be honest, I don't prefer neither of them. It's kind of like it's just DevOps. There's no DevSecOps or no SecDevOps. Putting this sec in everything, like adding it, kind of tries to put an emphasis on security, and it's important part. But the thing is, security is not outside this process. It's just DevOps. Security should be integral part of it. It should be included there from very start. I'm often asked, when do you need to start with security in DevOps? Well, the answer is very simple here. If you started writing code and didn't discuss the security, you're already late. You need to go back and start dealing with it. That's like very important part of everything. And we need to consider security aspect of the story early on, as early as possible. Now, what are we talking about? Like, to include the security in the DevOps process, we need to have few things. We need to have a clear and concise communication. We need to have everyone on board, and everyone needs to be aware of all the sides in the story. We need to treat security as a code. We will discuss that a little bit more in detail because there are several traps in this security as code part. We need to do mandatory trainings. We need to raise security awareness, and everyone on team needs to be aware of the security issues and threats. And of course, we need to integrate security in the DevOps cycle itself. It needs to be part of the cycle. It's not like security is outside just observing what's happening. Security needs to be part of the DevOps. Now, for the clear and concise communication, we need all sides in the story to be involved and have a clear line of communication with each other. There's a big issue that usually happens in this story, and it's concerning the numbers. So, some numbers from the most of the organizations, some statistical numbers show that on 100 developers, on average, we're going to have around 10 people in operations. And when we are discussing security, on 110 people combined, developer and operations, it's going to be single security person. Now, this is a really low percentage. And what happens in this kind of situation is security is becoming a bottleneck. Security is becoming a problem because they cannot deal with all the requests and all the issues that might appear. So this is the first part of the story. Like, if we want to have this clean communication part, we need to have security personnel on board. The story doesn't, of course, end there. We need to move on. We need to provide mandatory trainings. Everyone needs to be aware of the issues. Awareness begins at day zero. We need to address all the security issues as soon as possible. We need to do cross-discipline trainings. So what this cross-discipline trainings really talk about is basically security covers in DevOps covers multiple aspects. So we have a secure coding procedures, we have security from security professional perspective, also operations handle certain part of security, and we need everyone on the team to be aware of all the other parts. Everyone cannot know everything about it, of course. Like, operations will not know everything about secure coding, but they need to know the basics, they need to know the concepts. So everyone needs to be aware of other people's responsibilities, just to have a better understanding and better communication process overall. Second thing is, in effective communication, we need to apply certain rules. We shouldn't use these kind of documents like Excel lists or Word documents. First of all, they create a certain security issues because of potential malicious attachments and so on, but also because of the versioning and not knowing who has the latest version, who changed what on what version, and so on. People working in parallel, never having the latest version with everything updated and so on. What we want to use actually is ports, like different tools, for example, in Azure DevOps or Jira. We also want to use Git or some other kind of versioning that will help us track the changes and know who applied them, and so on. When we are discussing security as a code, we need to understand that this doesn't like only means certain things. This is the part that people often fall into, the hidden trap, because people are often referring, when discussing security as a code, it's going to be like infrastructure as a code and configuration as a code. No, everything should be treated as a code and secured. This applies to application source code. That's where it begins. Like, that part needs to be treated with security as a code. We need to consider how we handle application source code. How are we applying best practices? Is it readable? Is it maintainable? And so on. That's where it starts. Then we are discussing things like Azure ARM templates or AWS CloudFormation or any other kind of infrastructure as code that can be from Terraform, PowerShell, and so on. Then we can move on to configurations of code, that we are ensuring that all the servers and services are set in proper way, in a secure way. And of course, very important part, especially when we're discussing cloud computing, is how we handle secrets. So secret management is also very important part. We need to ensure that any kind of sensitive information, especially usernames, passwords, are not exposed anywhere in the plain text. We want to have proper secret management and not display these things in application code itself or anywhere else for that matter. Now, the last part is that we need to integrate security in the DevOps cycle. Security needs to be part of the cycle itself. From the planning through the process, it needs to be there every step of the way. How do we actually do that? So it starts with the planning. We need to integrate security into sprint planning and reviews. We need to discuss security stories. We need to plan security tasks. We need every task actually should have a certain security aspect to it. Like, how is it accessed? Is it over HTTPS? Is it always protected? Are APIs open, or they need some kind of authentication and so on? These things need to be considered like during the sprint planning. Like when we're creating tasks, we should consider security aspects of them. Sorry. Now, next part is with coding. We need to do trainings for secure coding. We should do test-driven development. So everything in the DevOps should be tested all the time, every time. We need to ensure that everyone is using correct tools, especially when we're discussing DevOps operation security. People are often using different types of tools, trying to apply different methodologies and so on. We want that eliminated in DevOps, and we want everyone on board using same and similar tools that are correct for the task. For example, like if you're doing coding, you can basically do that with anything. Like you don't need much. Like you can do that in Notepad, right? You can write code in Notepad. That's not an issue. But what happens when you're using something like Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code? It helps you highlight certain things. It helps you detect certain things. And it's much easier with those tools to do. And of course, we want to do proper pull requests when we are submitting code and so on. Pull requests that include certain build verifications, code reviews, other people reviewing the code that's submitted, and so on. Then we're moving to builds. During the builds, we want to do several things that can verify what's in there, what's our code like. So we can do static code analysis. Next thing is doing a dynamic code analysis, which kind of increases the security. We also want to do dependency checks and package management the proper way. What this means is basically we are often using different types of libraries, third-party components, and so on. We want to verify that they are valid and up to date. Are there any kind of known vulnerabilities for these dependencies or packages that we are using? Are those vulnerabilities removed? Is there a newer version, and so on? Those are things that we need to pay attention to very, very much. I often seen that when project starts, they just roll out certain version of the package, and then it stays there forever unless it creates an issue. What we want to do is maintain those dependencies, verify that we are using the latest versions, and that the versions that we're using don't have any vulnerabilities detected. Then we're moving to testing. Testing is an integral part of the DevOps in many terms, from the quality and so on, but also very important from the security. So what we want to do is during testing, we want to develop security test cases. So we want to use test cases that are going to test the security itself. There are also multiple techniques that we can do, like fuzzing. Fuzzing is basically throwing random things at the application and seeing if we're going to get any unexpected reply. So basically throwing random things and trying to figure out if it's going to break application in any security way. Also, load testing. This is often questionable, but I have a very, very valid reason for it. The load testing is basically throwing a lot of things at your application, seeing if it will break, basically because of too many requests. However, the security aspects of it is once the application is on overload, like basically everything is breaking down, can I slip in through? Like, can I slip through? Are there kind of parts of the application that will not be protected once I overload it? Once certain parts or APIs break down, will I be able to bypass them and access database directly, or something similar? So this is where load testing and security testing fall together. And last, we have certain things like, for many years, we have static application security testing and dynamic application security testing. So static application security testing, also known as white box testing, is known method where you have the access to the code, you analyze the code and try to find vulnerabilities in the application itself. On the other hand, dynamic application security testing, known as black box testing, is when you don't know what source code looks like. You don't have access to the code, but you're trying to break the application by throwing some SQL injections or something similar to bypass security. These two methods were used for a very, very long time. And now we have a latest one, which is integration application security testing. So basically, this one combines the previous two. We need to combine them to actually get a third one, which is better one, and it's basically leveraging best from everything. Then we have a process of release and deploy. We have to do certain checks in this department as well. So during the release and deploy, we want to do post-deployment security scans just to verify that there are no new vulnerabilities compared to what we had previously. Also, we want to do a post-deployment checkout. We want to have a certain checklist of certain elements that needs to be in place to verify that our release and deploy actually succeeded. We want to have certain checklist of basically a baseline that we expect to have once the deployment is finished, certain security features settings that needs to be in place once code was released. Now, the most important part is basically for the security, and traditionally the most important part for the security is once we actually do everything, like we planned, we coded, built, tested, deployed. Now it's in production. Now it's where the fun begins. We don't stop security with release. That's the most important part. And this part is actually what traditional IT addresses very well. But once the code is in there, we want to look at many aspects. So we want to monitor logs. We want to look at any of possible anomalies, want to detect any kind of strange behavior. We also want to scan for vulnerabilities. We want to detect if there are any known potential threats inside, any loopholes inside our system that can be exploited. We want to track dependencies. We want to know what our system depends on, because very often vulnerability comes from the third party. This happened many times, or especially in the last couple of years, when large organizations were hacked. They were actually hacked through the third parties, very often through the third parties. What happens is basically large organizations are going to have a very tight security. When they have a contractor, a smaller organization, they are probably going to have a little looser security compared to the big guys. And the bad guys are trying to access to the third party, so basically to their smaller partner. Once they're in, they have an easier way to sneak into the big house. So we really want to track dependencies and know what our system depends on, and also want to verify that there are not too many loopholes and that we are not leaving too much space to those third parties to be exploited. We want to do regular patching. We want to use latest, apply updates, and so on. What is really important is to do, especially when we're discussing web applications and cloud, is that we want to do occasional pen testing. Pen testing is kind of an expense from many perspectives, but we need to do it. At least quarterly, we should perform certain pen tests just to verify where we stand. I understand that it's not possible. Pen tests actually take time, take a lot of effort, and it's not really possible to include them in every release, especially if you are releasing multiple times per day. But we should do occasional pen test just to verify where we stand. Also, we want to have a summary view of critical tasks. For any detections on everything that's going on, we want to have a list. What's going on and to know what needs to be performed in the future. We want to create occasional assurance scans just to verify where we are. We want to review role-based access activities. We want to see who is accessing the application, when they are accessing them. Why are they doing certain things? Are they accessing certain servers? Is there a particular reason for it, and so on? We want to track those things, and we want to review them. We also want to, excuse me, we also want to have metrics on trends and activity from the security perspective. DevOps is all about metrics, collecting all sorts of data, but we want to look at that data from the security perspective as well. And finally, we want certain runbooks to help us auto healing. We want to have certain tasks that can help us prevent the threat. Like basically, if we are under attack, can we create a runbook? Can we create a script that will automatically block the IP address from the attackers and so on? We want these certain similar things in place to protect us, to help us be ready. The list, of course, doesn't end here. There are many other aspects that we need to consider. For example, we need to keep other things in mind. For example, we need to consider access management. We need to have a proper procedures and control over access management. Who has access when? Which teams do have access to which environments? Like we don't have same rules for development, QA environment, staging, production. These are going to be different. But we need to have a proper procedures and setups to manage this. We want to use two aspects that I'm a big fan of. So just-in-time access and just enough administration are two big things I'm a big fan of. No one needs more permissions than they need to do their job. So basically, having everyone on the team with the global admin access is a really bad idea. You want to assign people with enough permissions not to interfere with their job, but nothing over that. The second part is if someone has an elevated access and they can access certain environments, it shouldn't be automatic. They should have just in time access when they can activate their access to certain environments with certain elevated privileges, but not by default. Those two aspects, those two principles, if you apply with them, they will increase your security big time. We also need to consider data security. How we are treating data. Is data secured enough? Is it encrypted? Is it exposed in any way? How are we dealing with backups, disaster recovery, and so on? These are also things that we really need to consider even in DevOps process. Doesn't stop there. We have network security scanning. We need to consider network security. What happens on our network? Are we monitoring entire network on all activities that are happening on our network? Are we tracking anomalies and so on? This is also very important aspect of that. And it doesn't end there. With cloud computing, it's kind of eliminated. We don't really consider physical security because it's someone else's job right now. But if we're not everyone is running everything in the cloud. If you're running things locally, we also need to address physical security, like what is happening actually with our servers. How is our server room secured? Do we actually provide everyone with the access? Who can access the server room? Is it just like I walk in and plug out everything, or take the disks out, and what happens then? So these are also things that we need to consider. Basically, the most important part of it is consider security early on, and it never stops. So basically, from the beginning, when you're discussing the application, we start talking about the security, and security discussions stop the day we are stopping with the application, when we are not using it anymore. This is where security stops in the DevOps process. Okay, I hope you actually found this interesting. I hope I inspire some thoughts, ideas, and that you will try to look it up and try to explore on this. Thank you very much.